can hear us?
Yeah, well, yeah, they should probably start hearing us now. Woo.
Okay.
Sorry about that, gang. We're still having internet troubles over here in Eastern
Can you hear us?
Kentucky, and
Yeah.
I have,
Yeah, they should probably start hearing us now.
and the technicians will be back again on Tuesday to try to hash this out. Unfortunately, it does tend to disconnect exactly at this time every single night.
So you were talking about runes, and you were talking about how this is something that's an older idea in fiction, and
Yes.
we've seen it implemented before. Why don't you just wrap up that point again, just so that we have some clean audio of it?
Okay, so this is something we've seen implemented a whole lot before in not so much fiction, but in games, because it's a fun system to play with, to customize a magic weapon with different abilities readily. So I'm kind of interested to see how that will affect play in Pathfinder, because I think it's a great idea for a system. So if it's done well, this should add a lot of options and customization and fun at the game table.
I also appreciate they go into it a little bit, that items, special item properties, so special materials rather. So like cold iron will be able to handle fewer runes and will be able to interact with magic items differently. That will be another factor in customizing your weapons. I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. I know that we've been talking about streamlining and making things simple, but the special magical property is another part of fiction, and it should be kept separate from the magical aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that only left one more blog post to talk about, and that was the Ranger class preview. And oh gosh, there was a lot to learn about the Ranger in this class preview. Mostly that the Ranger is now the Slayer.
Effectively, right down to not being able to cast spells. Indeed. That was something we learned right in the introduction, that the default Ranger will not be casting spells. I don't know if, because there's a separation now of spells and rituals we've learned in the magic section. Ranger is a class that I see doing a lot of rituals when I'm picturing famous Rangers, but it's true. You don't picture Rangers casting spells in the middle of combat. But as far as the Slayer similarities, yeah, favorite enemy is now basically favorite target. It's called Hunt Target, and it's actually a little more diverse than just the favorite target, which really was just I do damage to you, and I get some bonuses for skills. This is a nice variety of things. It interacts differently depending on melee versus ranged weapons. And it can still interact with two-weapon fighting. This is really the first time we've seen a focus on two-weapon fighting as a core part of the class. We know that it was two-weapon fighting has been taken away from the fighter to the point that the Valeros doesn't even use his iconic dagger in the art now. Valeros has now become a shield wielder. But Harsk in this new iconic art, where his facial structure is different than we were used to for him, and doesn't entirely line up with the new art for the dwarves. Not that it's like contradicts it, it's just like this is a Harsk face, not the new dwarf face. Here he's seen wielding two weapons, and that's not what we're used to from Harsk. We're used to him wielding that crossbow, which he still has on his back, but it just shows that this is the emphasis of the Ranger now. You really can be the range guy or the two-weapon fighting guy, but you can still be the two-weapon fighter. That has not been taken away from the Ranger, even though a lot of other things that they're known for has been.
I really appreciate the direction they're taking, because when Pathfinder was first even being introduced, there were calls throughout the community to reinvent the Ranger, to not use spellcasting. I do know that there are some people that do like that aspect of the Ranger, because it's been a part of the game since there's been a Ranger in the game. But it doesn't fit a lot of the class fantasy. A lot of people just want to be the really cool scouty, naturey fighter that we see in Aragorn and a lot of Elven examples of their characters, and it is just what the fans seem to have wanted. And so even though they're going in this direction, I'm not seeing a whole lot of backlash through the community. There is definitely some, but there's been some for every single change. Doesn't matter which change, there's somebody that doesn't like it, but there's a lot less here. And there was a whole lot of calls, to the point that a spellless Ranger was one of the best articles in Kobold Quarterly. We called it out on the podcast when that article was published, and then when Pathfinder produced their own spellless Ranger, it was one of the more popular archetypes for the Ranger. It seems that people intentionally wanted to get rid of that class feature They just did not want it for their character fantasy. And I think changing the hunt target or ability and
favorite enemy,
changing to hunt target is the way to go, because favorite enemy involved a whole lot of metagame choice, and then it had a very steep penalty for getting that choice wrong. For instance, in my Rise of the Rune Lords game, one of my players chose goblins as their favorite enemy because they knew it would be an enemy they fought. And then you get out of that first book, and there sure aren't a whole lot of goblins anymore. It also was an ability that your first choice you kept getting better at, when realistically the things you wanted to hunt at low level you no longer cared about at high level, because you were fighting bigger, stronger creatures that you would want the stronger bonuses for. So oftentimes you would see rangers of first level say, evil outsiders is mine. And like, you're not going to fight a lot of evil outsiders for a few levels. So that's an ability that just does not get used at all, so that it becomes useful at higher levels when they are facing a foe like that.
It also calls out in the blog post that most rangers will be favorite enemy humans.
Indeed.
That you go to ranger school and the first thing they teach you is how to kill humans. This is an important skill. It makes sense logically, but the idea that every nature-based creature is an assassin of humanity is kind of a scary thought.
Mm-hmm.
Another change. This is a sentence I'm going to read verbatim. Specific ranger feats allow him to gain an animal companion at the same progression as a druid's.
Thank goodness.
Potentially with special benefits that only a ranger can obtain. So you said that the ranger is now the slayer. The ranger is also the hunter.
Indeed. Well, can be the hunter.
Yes. Okay, it's true, because those are feats. So you're not defaulted to have an animal companion. If you want to go that route, you could be as good as a druid.
Yeah. And also the druid has to go specifically for the animal companion too. That's not an assumption anymore. Which we saw during the banquet previews. And again, if you've seen the banquet preview Twitch chat or the live broadcast that Paizo put out, it's worth going to see our version of that, because we have much better views of the slides. So you're able to actually read a lot of the text on those things that they put up on screen that we as an audience got to read at the time, but didn't show up very well during the live broadcast.
Can I make an anecdote about that video?
Sure.
So during that part, Jason Bowman was saying like, oh no, I hope people don't see this and screen capture it. And, like what we did, like we coordinated with Paizo. Paizo shared the slides. So like, when he was making that joke, I was like, just in case he's serious, I'm only going to put this up for 5 seconds, whereas every other slide I put up for 10 seconds. And after publishing it, I realized it's like, no, you pause.
Yeah.
People can pause and read everything on there. They're not writing everything down in 5 seconds, going back in the video and trying to write some more. So yeah, I felt kind of foolish.
No, but that's something we did with the knowledge and cooperation of Paizo.
Yes. Okay, so we talked about they can have animal companions. One thing that surprised me is that it references the Hunter's Bond class feature. Probably one of the least used options of any class feature from the core rulebook that has an A and a B in option is the ranger can bolster their allies option, because it's a standard action, and so instead of being a fighter, you're a bad bard. But the legacy of that option, the idea that the ranger is there to give pointers to the group and help people out, is still there. This is still an angle of the ranger that is being supported, and I know it's probably not something that people are like, well, my ranger always takes that ability, but it is probably something that people look at that ability and say, I would take that if it wasn't so terrible. And so now they have an option to revisit the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This also, it seems that the ranger is going to be one of the most mechanically changed classes in Pathfinder 2nd. There's very little of the original ranger mentioned in here, because their core ability has changed. How the combat is going to work with weapon specializations has changed system-wide. The animal companion's not even automatic, and of course magic's gone. And the abilities they mentioned are stuff that other classes had, not even the ranger.
And finally, snares. Snares were there is the Trapper Ranger archetype, the one from Ultimate Magic that is not a magical archetype. Yeah, this has now become a core option for Rangers, that you can be setting up snares, you can be setting up traps, and there seems like there's a wide variety of them. So I have a feeling this is going to be an option that's going to be encouraged just because of the level of design that has to go into it. I'm sure that the design team would not want to hear that they put all these, page count into this one ability, this one track that you can take with your Ranger, and nobody uses it. I like that traps are a core part of it, because a lot of new players will often ask me, okay, I want to set up a trap. How do I do that? And I'm like, unfortunately, you have to take a specific class and a specific archetype. Otherwise, there's no real clean rules for players doing it. It's not far off in that you still need to take a specific class and specific options. But at least now I don't have to point to a book that it shouldn't belong in and say, and you have to specifically buy this book.
Well, secondly, on to counteract that a little bit, they do mention in the comments that they didn't mean to imply to marry the snares to the Ranger as much as it appears here. While Rangers are good at snares and get options to be good at snares, they're not the only ones that can be. Evidently, the snares will be an option available to many characters that want to use them, but the Ranger does have some abilities that tie in well with them.
Now, my one fear about this is, as a GM, knowing where these snares are and having to ignore that to run my monsters over them. This is the type of option that as a GM makes me uncomfortable, because I am more in my head than I usually like to be.
Indeed. But I mean, it's something you have to do as a GM, and to be honest, this is stuff we do as a GM all the time. We ignore things that we know because we know all things.
It's true. Mm-hmm. Yeah, between my having to do that as a GM and having the options, I definitely say, no, get this option in the game. This is something that players want to be doing. This just makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to do it, there's some ways to work around that. You can have the player, you can do it battleship style and just put it on your map and just have the player write on a hidden piece of paper where the snare is, and then he can go, aha, you stepped on my snare. If you wanted to, I'm just going to have the stupid orcs run into it because that's the more fun option at the table.
Fun?
Yeah, fun trumps everything.
Now, that's it for the blog post. Mm-hmm. You have a link here in our notes to the character video on Twitch.
Yeah, so
I have not watched this video.
On Friday, Jason Bowman got on Twitch with Dan, and they walked through how to create a character in the playtest. So this is finally going to answer a lot of things about how characters were made. And specifically, they went into how the background and your ancestry and your class choices affected like what stats and skills and such and feats you have. So they talked about this at the banquet as well, that it's ABC. First you pick your ancestry, and so during the stream Jason chose elf, and then you choose your background, and he chose exiled. And then you choose your class, and he went barbarian. So he was creating an elf barbarian.
Totally on board.
Yep. Okay. So when he chose elf, that besides the various ancestry feats that you could take, and I'm not going to go into everything, but I do want to go into how the stats were chosen and mention when there were abilities. So with ancestry, it looks like you get a feat when you choose your ancestry. So you will get an ancestry feat right away. And then you will get more ancestry feats when you level up periodically. So it doesn't look like it's something you choose to get into ancestry feats. It looks like, if I'm looking at the character sheet right, which they showed the character sheet, it's a landscape character sheet, and on the back they have all the different feats listed with the levels you will get that feat option in. And so ancestry, they had like 1, 5, 7, I don't know what they were, but they were just listed there. And when you hit this level, you are going to fill this blank in with your choice of what feat goes here. That's a neat thing. So you will get ancestry feats, and elves in this case got a bonus to dexterity and intelligence, and a penalty to charisma, which they called flaw.
Not Constitution?
Sorry, Constitution. You're right. Whew. Okay, and that maps with what we know about the elf, where they get +2 to Dex and Int, and they get -2 to Constitution. So this doesn't. This is just seems to be a direct analogy to what we're used to. Also, at that point in time, they got what was called a free bonus, which is a bonus that at that point in character creation, they got to put a plus, and they were basically just doing exactly that, putting a plus next to the stat. They got to pick where their next bonus would go, and he chose strength because barbarian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then periodically through character creation, they went to class, and class gave you a set bonus, and then you got another free choice bonus. The set bonus was to the key stat of the class, and for barbarians that was strength. So I was a barbarian, I put a plus next to strength, and I get another bonus that I can put anywhere that didn't get a bonus at this step, and I think that went into con to counteract the penalty. I think the background also had a bonus and a set. Yeah, the background had a set bonus that you got to choose between two, which was for the exiled, you had to choose between Constitution and Intelligence. I may have got that wrong, but he chose Constitution so that he could get 2 bonuses in Constitution, and that was set. But then it also gave him a free bonus that he put into Strength. And then when all that was said and done, you then get 4 free bonuses, and the only restriction there is you can't double up on that step. So he picked 4 more stats to get a bonus, and at the end of it, he had an elf that had 18 strength, 12 constitution, 14 dex, 12 int, 12 wisdom, and 12 charisma. So a pretty typical spread of stats, and I was kind of impressed that an elf barbarian managed to get to 18 in its primary stat, even using this new system. And it kind of gave us a little bit of an example of how this new system was going to generate attribute points. And there was a lot more free choice than I expected when we heard that that the choices you made would guide where those bonuses went. It seems that the vast majority of the bonuses you get to choose where they go, or you get a choice between 2 options, and then there are literally only 3 that are set in stone. One was your ancestry, which is just like Pathfinder 1st edition, and then one was your background. Oh no, and your class always got a raise in its primary stat.
So now an earlier argument I had was that if you're not going to be rolling dice the way that you've traditionally been generating ability scores, then there's no reason for the ability scores to still be on a 20 scale. It feels like have those bonuses and make it a 10 scale. Like, it just feels more logical.
Well, honestly, especially when you saw how these immediately turned into stats, all the pluses basically turned into the bonus that the ability scores generate. So having 4 pluses in strength meant that you had an 18 strength, which just so happens to be +4, because the bonuses are always +2. And then when I'm looking at the rest of the system, everything is based off the bonuses, to the point that even equipment load is based off the bonuses, not the stats.
Really?
Yeah. Because how bulk is calculated, it's like 5 plus your strength bonus is what is encumbered. So as long as you're under that, you're not encumbered, and your max load is 10 plus your stat bonus for strength. So that's super easy to calculate compared to the old system where you had to look up that chart that was always never where you expected it to be, and you always had to look it up in the index to find it, and it was annoying. So the 20 stats don't need to exist at all in this system. They could go full mutants and masterminds, and all you're doing is the bonuses. I think the only reason the stats still go to 20 is so that the rolling the dice is still something you can choose to do, because they did say that option for generating ability scores would still be in the playtest as an option. Though for the actual playtest part, they want, if you're participating in the playtest, they do want you to try the default option for that, which they mentioned in the How to Playtest seminar.
But if rolling the dice is still an option, it's still, your character sheet still only needs the bonus. So the rolling the dice option in the rulebook can just have a chart that, hey, if you got an 18, then it's a +4 on your character sheet. There really is no reason for an ability score anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there was barely a reason for the ability score to exist in first edition Pathfinder, and in Starfinder they're criticizing it for the same reason, that system got so tightened down that there is exactly one reason at all, that calculating your carry load is the only reason the ability score matters, and qualifying for 2 feats is the only reason your ability score matters in Starfinder. So I don't know why, other than to try to protect the sacred cows or to make this not feel too different, that they can't just go to pure bonuses as your stats.
Yeah. The second edition is already the Sacred Cow Slayer.
Yeah, there's so much being changed in this. I think they may just think that that's a bridge too far. But I don't see why. I mean, Mutants, I've played a lot of Mutants and Masterminds. It works great in that system. All I worry about is strength +4, and that's how much I add to strength rolls. And it's super easy to keep in your head.
I don't know if you've ever had this. Sometimes when I've got a new player and I tell them, okay, you've got your strength is 18, so that's a +4. And they're like, oh, okay, so it's 22 strength? It's like, no, it's not. You're not adding 4 to your 18. This is now anything that matters related to strength is a +4.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, this system is a system that has completely eliminated the need for the ability score.
Like, the other reason it kind of made sense was that main chart at the beginning of character creation, where like bonus spells and stuff were based off different ability scores for different classes, and your carry load, and like just a bunch of legacy stuff left over from second edition, and none of that matters at this point in the game. It didn't even matter in the last version of the game. Pathfinder 1, your ability scores did not matter except for qualifying for feats, and they could have just changed that over to the applicable bonus. And did you ever intentionally have an odd ability score in Pathfinder 1? If you did, it was on the way to getting an even one, right?
I mean, yeah, not intentionally. You're right. Like, if I'm doing points by and it's like, all right, well, I've got a remainder, I might as well make this a 13 instead of a 12. Mm-hmm. But yeah, unless it's like, if I make this a 15 now, then when I get my +1 to an ability score, I can make it a 16, and that matters. Like, the only planning is for eventually this will be an even number.
Right.
And just while we're on the subject, mm-hmm. I've always been super frustrated that the bestiaries list the ability score and not the ability score bonus, because ability score bonus is the information I need. Mm-hmm. Why did they ever choose to put the thing that, like, putting them both makes sense, mm-hmm. but just putting the ability score is completely useless to me. It requires complete memorization of the system, which eventually I got, but still, it's the wrong choice.
Well, good news, Costello. What we saw at the banquet for the bestiary articles they show the ability score bonuses on the critters, not the scores.
Thank you. Now, can they also list which save it's affecting? Because that was the other thing that always drove me nuts. That it's like, here's the DC of the save. Figure out which save it is. And then you could be surprised just how often you could be confused whether it's fort or will.
I think a lot of that is going to be spelled out. If from what we've seen, with the simplification of the monster rules, in the fact that it's just literally this is the information you need while running the monster, I'm hoping that won't be an issue going forward at all.
Well, also the codification of the rules and the way things are being extremely spelled out. Mm-hmm. It feels like not spelling things out is not a worry that we should have right now.
Exactly.
You reminded me when you mentioned key abilities that we don't know the Ranger's key ability score. For most of the previews, it's mentioned it.
Yeah, no, they don't mention it. I'm assuming it's Dex.
I would also assume Dex, or maybe they would do Dex/Wisdom. So like the monk, where you would get to choose one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we'll find out.
Just because wisdom is always associated with wilderness type characters.
Yeah. All right, and that's the second edition playtest news we have to give. at this point. So how do you think, how has this affected your excitement for second edition or odds of converting?
Archetypes have me very excited. That is probably the one blog post that is most like it most directly addresses my hesitation. And so that I appreciate. The magic items, it seemed like you were saying that there's a lot of people in a lot of different camps. I seem to be in the camp that agrees with most of those changes. And so that's something that if there's that might be scaring some people off, but that hasn't scared me away. And the character creation, the one thing that I'm worried about is that the ability score generation will not generate enough variety of characters. And I'm coming from a character that still, given the choice, will roll up my ability scores, specifically because I am intrigued by the abilities, by the variety of ability scores I might get. And anytime I roll up a points by character, it just feels like there's one or two different sets of numbers I will always roll up or always buy up. And so that's the one thing that it's like I am going to miss more variety to ability scores. Like the fact that it's going to be nearly impossible to have a penalty to your ability score is unfortunate, because a lot of the times when I'm making a character and it's like I am stuck with an ability score penalty, that becomes like a defining part of that character's life and a character personality.
Well, it sounds like all non-humans are going to have at least one penalty. It's on you if you want to buy it off or not.
I foresee everyone buying it off.
I guess that's fair enough.
Like, even as someone that when I roll up characters randomly, I appreciate having a penalty. When I'm doing points by, I very rarely to basically never have a penalty. No. So given the option, I don't want it, even though I appreciate it when it's there. I know it's a contradiction, but it's just the reality of why would I deliberately give myself that kind of penalty?
Oh gosh, Glanville has 7 strength right now in no direction of interest.
You doing okay?
He's getting by. He's getting by. When he took that strength damage, I'm worried.
Oh yeah. Oh man, since you brought up Adventurous, this is actually a pretty good lead into the next news item. It's not a second edition news item, but might as well do that, and then I've got an Adventurous anecdote.
Okay.
Crystal Fraser, the game master for Adventurous.
Oh yes.
Now former employee at Paizo. Actually, today was her first not day of working there, not counting holidays. So Crystal's been working at Paizo for 9 years on and off. She at one point was working on more like administrative stuff, like she was managing the blog or whatever, and she was freelancing. So like she was doing creative stuff, but in a freelance capacity, and her official job was a little more administrative. And then she got let go and then brought back as a full-time creative. And since then, and then she started doing the comic as a freelancer, because she is just someone that is bubbling over with creative energy and ideas, and she just needs as many outlets as possible. And so that has led to her looking for opportunities as a full-time freelancer. So she has left Paizo, and she will continue to work for them. She is leaving on good terms, and we wish her all the best in her future opportunities. I know that she already has several plans, which I won't divulge because, it's none of your business, listeners.
Yeah, well, it's her business to divulge when she's ready.
Exactly. But, this is a good thing. This is ultimately, it is Crystal's decision. Paizo has accepted it. We will continue to get Crystal Fraser options for Pathfinder and Starfinder, which has she written anything for Starfinder?
Gosh, I don't know offhand, but I would assume yes. I know that a lot of the adventure writers were trading work across things.
That makes sense.
No, if she wrote anything for Starfinder offhand, though. It would.
Well, it is one of the specific things she was saying that I now will continue to freelance to Pathfinder and Starfinder. Like she called out that she would be working on Starfinder. So her leaving Paizo has actually broadened her ability to contribute to Paizo. Plus being a talented artist, cartographer. I don't know if she can sing. I'll have to ask that. But every other creative endeavor that I've ever heard you can have, Crystal is great at it. So people can look forward to many more Crystal Fraser contributions and just a wider variety of them now. And people have asked if she will continue to GM for Adventurous. Absolutely. Her capacity, or like her position as a Paizo employee, had nothing to do with her Adventurous, or like her position in Adventurous. it was cool that we got the developer of that adventure path to run it, and it's cool that we had a Paizo employee running it, but it's coolest that we had Crystal Fraser, the person running that adventure path.
Yeah, and Crystal's responsible for so many great adventures that she has written, including one of the most famous Pathfinder adventures, The Harrowing, was one of her work. She did work on Iron Gods and Giant Slayer, and she was also responsible for the background and personality for Shadra, the shaman iconic.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing, like, she would champion a lot of causes. And so a lot of the time when we would credit Paizo, just broadly saying, like, here are things that Paizo is doing in the name of inclusion and the name of integrating different social issues into their stories, Crystal was often the most directly responsible for those things being included. And as you see in the blog post, she's also raised awareness among the staff, and a lot of people really respect her ability to stay on top of social issues, communicate them to other people, and educate them. Like, a lot of times on the internet, you'll see people argue that there's no point in arguing because no one will ever change their position. Crystal Fraser is the kind of person that can get people to change their position.
And you will see her on a lot of panels on the subjects of various diversity issues and inclusion issues in gaming. I mean, gosh, she's on so many panels. Not even outside of that, she spoke on so many panels at PaizoCons and Gen Cons. It was like she was almost an honorary host of the show just because of how many hours of her talking we have on this network.
I also enjoy when she's on a panel, she'll usually start the panel by saying, like, okay, so we're here for, and then say something nonsensical and not the actual topic. I like that she chose a variety of nonsensical things. She doesn't just make the same joke every time. She uses the same joke template to make a variety of jokes.
Indeed. Well done, Crystal.
So before we move on to the next news item, there's something I want to call out. I guess it's a shout out to Roll20 and features that I wasn't really aware of. So people know that we are running War for the Crown and running Adventurous using Roll20, and this is, we are being provided the materials for to run it by Roll20 in a, it's a sponsorship arrangement. I was telling Tina about my wife Tina, I was telling her about some of the stuff that happened in the last session, and I was describing this one NPC that it's like, Crystal described him one way, and then she showed us the art, and we all kind of found him adorable, which clearly was not the intent of the character when she was describing him. And so I was telling Tina this, and I was like, you know what? I could log into Roll20. I can show you the art. That stuff is all archived in our game. So, I have an archive. I have everything we've ever spoken in chat, all of our handouts. I could go and reference at any time. And that is not something I realized was an advantage of Roll20, and I am extremely excited to have access to that now.
I found out that when I was logging in to prep my Skittermander game, and then I saw every other game I've ever run for Society there, and I was able to just take things I already worked on and just use them.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And another feature, so when I run the game, or when we're playing an Adventurous, I have had tabs open for D20 PFSRD and the Pathfinder PRD and Archives of Nethys, just because I reference different material different ways, and having access to all of those sites is useful. Completely forgetting that the entire Pathfinder rule set is tabbed and searchable within Roll20. And that there's absolutely no reason I need to be going to these other websites other than weird habits and weird associations of this information you are ideally get at this website. So starting the next recording, I am definitely going to try and play completely without those tabs, use just the Roll20 rules feature, because what am I doing, Param?
Oh gosh. Okay, so this is going to sound like I'm speaking for the sponsor on this one, but I couldn't help notice that on the prepared stuff that they've done, because we're using the War for the Crown module developed by Roll20 module that they've put together that you can pay to use. It has all the Fog of War stuff exactly mapped to the room perfectly, and just that alone, just the work there, I was like, I'm sitting there and just admiring it because I can just like barely see the line when we're playing before Crystal opens it up, and I can just see the different room lines. I'm like, and all the grid is matched up in advance, which is really annoying because Paizo maps don't always have grids that are real. So even when you have the map art and you put it on that layer and you measure out this grid to get it lined up, and then you'll notice it's fine here, and across the map all my intersections are in the middle because Paizo cheats at their grids. All of that has been taken care of in Roll20, and just that amount of stuff that it saved is just like, oh my gosh, I totally wish I was playing a prepared module that somebody else did all this work for me.
Yeah, I know that when I've played on Roll20, and because when we were doing Hell's Rebels, we were doing it partially people around the table, and then some people were playing remote, and so our game table was Roll20. And when Jeff took the time to do the Fog of War, I appreciated it, and when he didn't, I pointed out, it's like, I like when we do maps with Fog of War, and he's like, do you know how much work that is? So having that work done, like as someone who doesn't want to do any prep as a GM, that's extremely valuable.
Right. What I usually do with the Fog of War when I'm having to do it manually is I just Fog of War the whole map, and then just get the eraser and just erase the room. So
I know you said that it just sounds like we're complimenting the sponsor, and we are, but this is all sincere compliments. And honestly, sometimes I feel like we don't bring enough attention to the fact that we've got all these cool Roll20 features while we're playing the game. But I'm definitely super happy that we were running this on Roll20. Like, we are playing with some of the greatest players that I know, and the greatest players I know just happen to be spread all over the continent. And I am really happy that I get to do this, and Roll20 has super facilitated that and has offered me a whole bunch of features that make my game better. So shout out to Roll20. More than just a sponsor, also a great service.
Alrighty, are we ready to wrap this up?
We should talk about the Ennies.
Oh, that was good to pitch. Alright, so the Ennies nominees were announced, and there was a lot of love for Starfinder and no love for Pathfinder in the Ennies this year. Starfinder was nominated for 8 categories, including Product of the Year with the core rulebook, Best Supplement, Starfinder Pact Worlds, Best Setting, Starfinder Pact Worlds, Best Monster/Adversary, Starfinder Alien Archive, and that one better win it because it really is the best monster book I have read in 10 years. Honestly, that book is so well done that I want that to be the future template of all the Pathfinder monster books from now on. They knocked that one out of the park. Best free product was First Contact, which is like the bonus bestiary that Pathfinder got when it first came out. Best cartography is Pact Worlds. Best interior art nominated Starfinder Core Rulebook. Best aid and accessory, the GM screen. I think that's probably just a popular award. It's got really cool art, but it's just a GM screen. But like, I don't understand when GM screens get this award unless they do something super unique, because GM screens are GM screens.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. GM screens have they are just not as useful as I used to think they are. I have no problem running without a GM screen at this point, actually.
Oh, I love my GM screens, and I especially
don't you have the cool castle though?
Yeah. But I have the so what I did with the castle is I don't always use the castle because it's not appropriate for Starfinder, because it's a castle.
Yep.
I would want a spaceport or a cool starship or something. But even when I'm using the castle, I printed out. Actually, I went into Photoshop and rearranged all the tables that I actually do use. Not all of them, but the ones that I like. And then I printed those out on cards, and I just like lean them against the inside of the castle on the shelves so that I still have the stats to quick reference when I need them.
That's good. I'm surprised that they don't do Adventure Path specific GM screens, because they've already got the art and they've got rules that are specific to the Adventure Paths enough that you could fill the back of any GM screen.
And that's something 5th edition does.
Oh yeah,
they have adventure specific GM screens, and it makes sense for Pathfinder. Totally makes sense. Honestly, the GM screen for Pathfinder, I hope they change it up for second edition because it's useful and I still use it, but there's they could have done so much better with that. And then when they've kept putting new ones out with different art on the outside but left the inside the same, it broke my heart a little bit. First of all, I want the GM screen landscape, not tall, because I like to be able to see and reach over it easy. And ever since I got landscape GM screens for 3.5 edition and then 4th edition's GM screen landscape and 5th edition's GM landscape, I do not understand why they don't do landscape, because I think it's just straight up the superior option. And I know they have reasons that they say that it's harder to fit things on it, but I still think it's the superior option.
So I'm tall, and I traditionally played with, for whatever reason, very tall players. Like, I am the 3rd tallest person in my old group, and so a landscape GM screen just makes me feel exposed.
Oh, like, I want there to be I'm not one of those GMs that likes to roll everything out in the open and have nothing between me and the players. No, I appreciate the utility of a GM screen to hide my notes, hide the miniatures I'm about to throw out there, to be able to roll in secret. I take full advantage of all of that stuff, and I enjoy having the reference material, but I do not like when it's this big shield that hides me from the nose down from my players. I did appreciate how the lower GM screens made it much easier for me to reach the miniatures and reach over onto the map, and also opened more of me up to the players. It didn't feel quite as like I'm just sitting here unseen like the Wizard of Oz narrating the adventure to my players. Pay no attention to the nerd behind the cardboard curtain.
Well, like I said, I prefer portrait, but I also just said that I don't even use my GM screen anymore. So do not take what my preference is in mind when they are designing this new product. You are the customer that they want to please. All right. I will just say one thing about the Ennies and the fact that no Pathfinder products were nominated. There is a very good chance that this is Paizo's design, that they just did not submit any Pathfinder products for nomination for a couple of reasons. One, they don't want to cannibalize the votes. They don't want to have Starfinder running against Pathfinder, because that could split the vote, since they are similar and they appeal to a similar type of judge. Two, Pathfinder can already say it is an Enia winning product, but Starfinder cannot, since the core rulebook is up for these Ennies. So, and three, Pathfinder First Edition is on its way out, and so they don't need to be, what was your? I was trying to reference the expression you got wrong earlier, and I don't remember.
I actually got the expression right, actually.
Did you?
Overgild the lily, or gilding the lily, to adorn unnecessarily something that is already beautiful and perfect.
So there we go. They don't need to overgild the lily of Pathfinder. It's time to gild the lily of Starfinder. Not overgild it, just gild it enough.
Yep, I can get it, totally.
Are we ready to wrap things up?
We are ready to wrap this up.
We will be right back with wrap-ups and shout-outs right after this.
And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 181 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Before we go, there are a couple of things I want to shout out to, but I also want to talk about Cosmic Power says in chat that Paizo did, in fact, not submit any Pathfinder products except the Inner Sea Taverns and a PFS scenario. Cosmic Power, can you give me a source for that information? Because, anyone can make that claim. I'm just curious where you got that information. Interesting that Inner Sea Taverns might be the one that makes the cut. And PFS scenarios, I believe it. There we go. Any awards stuck? Oh, there's actually a list of the ones that were submitted. I didn't realize that. That's interesting. Cool. So I'm not going to research it now. At this point, you've provided a source. I believe you, Cosmic Power. Why do you think Inner Sea Taverns? Do you have that book?
I haven't read it yet. I have it, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, of course you have it. All right. I never even thought to pick it up. It just didn't seem like a book I'd want. But if there was one of the ones that they thought was worth it, I might have to go back and look at that. Mm-hmm. And then a PFS scenario. Yeah, the PFS scenarios never get their due.
I know. And honestly, we just did an episode on this for Starfinder, but the Starfinder Society scenarios, the PFS has always been secretly awesome. And Starfinder Society might secretly be the best part of Starfinder because they do so great with those adventures and taking advantage of the fact that that game is like aping episodic 90s sci-fi. So that's the perfect format to have episodic 90s sci-fi adventures.
All right, so now actual shoutouts. First one is a Kickstarter. It is the Magic Description Cards for writers, storytellers, and GMs. Yeah. I am not shouting out to this because it's a good product as much as I am because I believe in the people that are running it. It's Conflict Games. They are the ones that released Conflict, which was the PvP adaptation of the Pathfinder role-playing game. We were big fans of Conflict when the revised version that came out. Mm-hmm. And I am interested in this product. So it's not that I am for or against it. Like I said, I'm shouting out more because it's the company that I'm getting behind. I am intrigued by this and I do want to know where it's going. So there's 23 days left to go. They are basically at their goal. But if you want to check it out, so Magic Description Cards for writers, storytellers, and GMs. It's over 100 cards with over 600 system-neutral phrases to help depict fantasy fiction magic.
And the play just seemed pretty easy. To get the deck of cards, it's only $25, so that's cool.
Yeah,
and the art looks really
100 cards.
The art is really impressive, and the layout is nice. So if they look like they're good-looking cards, they're also tarot-sized.
Yes, so it's a good handful.
Yeah, this might. I'm this. When does this Kickstarter end? I might have to get in on this. 23 days.
And yeah.
Okay.
Next up, Design Finder. So Design Finder, we mentioned it, I believe, last episode. Mm-hmm. We are not giving it as much attention as we gave to RPG Superstar, which is, this is the spiritual successor of RPG Superstar. The reason is just timing. We are so preoccupied with PaizoCon coverage, upcoming Gen Con coverage.
Mm-hmm. Working on 4 podcasts?
Yes. So I don't want people to take this as a slight against Design Finder. I appreciate this. I have not read the entries. Sorry, not the entries, but the results for round 2. They have been posted. This is an encounter location, an adventure location. Mm-hmm. When I have the time, I'm looking forward to diving into this. I don't want to half report on it and not have the information to properly give it its due. So this is a shout out, not a news item. If you are interested in RPG Superstar, if you were a fan of RPG Superstar, if you were interested in the process of designing and, if you are interested in at all ever becoming a designer, I recommend you check it out. And I also recommend, we had 2-part series on our blogs. One part was written by Randall last week, and then one was written by Luis. Randall wrote, he offered the item that he submit, and then his designer notes. And then Luis gave him developer notes of why he thought maybe that item could have been stronger. Mm-hmm. And finally, I'll give a shout out to another podcast that I've been enjoying quite a bit lately, the Board Game Design Lab podcast. So it is board game specific. There's very rarely do they talk about RPGs, but the host, his name is Gabe, I forget his last name. One thing that he is passionate about is getting out there, being productive, finding ways to be more productive. And he will often have sections of any interview where he's just talking about people's process, and not just like a creative process, but a productivity process. And his most recent episode was all about things he's learned from non-gamers about productivity. And if you are someone that is like, I want to get into this stuff, or I want to be creative, and yet I never seem to find the time, or never seems to amount to anything, this is a great conversation about focusing those energies, making sure you don't just have ideas, but goals and plans. I highly recommend it. The Board Game Design Lab podcast. It is at boardgamedesignlab.com.
I need to binge this, considering we're going to be filming RPG Design Club this week.
I have been binging it. It is quite good. I wish I'd gotten into it earlier because there's over 100 episodes, and at this point I just want to read them all, or not read them all, listen to them all. Mm-hmm. But I know that if I like go back to back with a few of them, then I don't digest them as well. Like I get the most out of this when I listen to one and then just listen to nothing for a while and just stew in my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is that everything?
That's everything on my list.
Okay. Oh, I do want to, on a similar note, I want to shout out to a YouTube channel that is super popular. They don't need my shout out, but it's incredibly valuable information, and that is Extra Credits. If you've not heard of this, Ryan, you know Extra Credits, right?
I love Extra Credit.
It is so good. It's mostly focused on video games, but so much of it is applicable to all sorts of gamings and all sorts of business models. And also they have a sort of like a historical side where it's more about history and not about gaming. And as a role player, knowing all of that history, like I just watched their series, a 5-part series on why paper money exists, and that will inform so much of what I do when I'm starting to work on like how a city's economy works in a game, and to know why these different things. I mean, there's just adventure ideas that you could have with just because how promissory notes came into being, and the fact that the person that invented them had to run for his life to another country on 2 occasions, and that in itself could be a fun adventure. Go check out that YouTube page or that YouTube channel if you've not checked it out. It's amazing.
Yeah, I can give a specific example of something that I've applied to my game design. They were talking about how, from a designer's point of view, you might have like when you level up, you do go from like 15 damage to 20 damage. And from the designer's point of view, it's like, that is a big difference. You've gone up a certain percentage. You've gone to like 33% of damage output. But if everyone's hit points are such that it still takes 2 hits to kill them, then to a player, nothing has happened when they leveled up, even though you know that the math is improved. And so it's important to look at an option, and it's like, what is this doing to the play experience? Mm-hmm. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.